Good evening, distinguished guests, panelists, and community leaders. On behalf of the chairperson, Susan Abro, and the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, KwaZulu-Natal Council, I would like to welcome you to our two-part event, Political Parties Addressing the KwaZulu-Natal Jewish Community. We're so excited to hear from our political representatives about the issues that are driving the upcoming local elections. We are a small but special community, deeply committed to uplifting South Africa as stakeholders, voters, and job creators, as well as strong patriots. It is my pleasure to hand over to our host for the evening, Howard Sackstein, our favorite chairman of the South African Jewish Report, to introduce our esteemed panel. We look forward to a lively debate and we welcome you to participate with questions in the chat. Over to you, Howie.
Thanks, Haya. Thank you so much, and a huge welcome to everyone this evening. We're going to try and make what generally is a very boring topic as lively and interesting as possible. So we want everyone to participate. We don't want to have this evening in the hands of only our politicians. We would love this evening to be in your hands as well. So please, if you're watching us on Zoom, and I presume you are, there are two ways you can communicate with us. The one is the chat functionality, which you'll see on the side. So please use it, comment, chat as we go. And if you have any questions for any of our politicians this evening, either put it into the chat section or alternatively into the Q&A section. And we want to make sure that we address your issues, the issues that are really important to you. So we were supposed to be joined by Makosi Koza from ActionSA, and she was going to be the first person that we brought up. Of course, tonight is the first of a two-part series, and tomorrow night we're back again, once again at 6 o'clock, and you can use the identical link tomorrow that you've used this evening in order to join us for our next political party section. But as we say, we're going to be joined by Makosi Koza. We're not quite sure where she is. Maybe she's got a little lost in the ether, but I like to think that we can start really with two of our much more interesting and dynamic people who are joining us this evening. We have representatives from the UIM, we've got representatives from the EFF, and hopefully in a few minutes, because we're just having some difficulty getting her to log on, we'll have a representative from ActionSA as well. So Neil de Beer, I want to start with you. You're going to tell us a little about your party, but I want to start with one question. These are local government elections. These are not national elections. Does anyone actually care?
Firstly, thank you very much. Shalom to everybody and to my esteemed Vusi Koza. It's good to see the EFF people there. Pity we're losing ActionSA, but we hope that they will come in. So people must care. I think, Howard, every election in the world is a formidable showpiece of your right as a citizen. And when people say they're not going to vote, when people say they will not vote, what the people don't understand is that this country has had a major battle for years for the right of people to actually vote. I think as an ex-MK commander, a member of Umkhonto we Sizwe, then a member of the ANC for 30 years, I was part of the struggle amongst many that wanted voting to be a right, not a privilege. So people should care that on the 1st of November, every vote counts. And it matters not who you put your name next to. What matters is that you actually enforce your right as a citizen to make a decision about the governance of your country. And that's why I think it is important.
So, Neil, I ran elections for 6 years. I was executive director of the Independent Electoral Commission. So I gave everyone watching here peace, freedom, and democracy, whether they appreciate it or not. But you come out of a very interesting background.
Sure.
But you're now not within the traditional structures that we know of the ANC or one of the other large political parties. So tell us, who is your party? How did it come about? And what do you actually stand for?
Well, it's actually easy. I did what Julius did. I left. I remember young Julius standing in my office on the 6th floor of Latuli House as the president of the ANC Youth League. And I left, I think, for a very specific reason, Howard. Like any other person, you come to a point where you're part of a structure. The structure that you join does not make you happy anymore. It does not speak for you. It doesn't act for you. And it definitely is going in a direction where you don't want to go. It was difficult to leave the ANC in 2017 at the Nasrec conference. And I think publicly everybody knows why. Everybody knows why I walked out after 30 years. The United
Tell us exactly why you walked out.
The reason why I left was an absolute differentiation in policy. The policy of the ANC debated at that conference at Nasrec absolutely went against the grain of what we envisaged our constitutional rights. But more than that, Howard, we were bloody going into an economic nightmare of what I now call an economic genocide. And they knew it, because we, the people that were in then the economy where I've been for the past 12 years running an international fund for Africa, told them that there are two things you're about to do. No matter the consequence or the ethos of land and the distribution, which no one argues, but land without compensation, without a resolve of what shall we do as government with the backing of people that get land, we would go into an economic suicide. And the second one was the nationalization of a reserve bank. Now, when you have been like me, experienced in global banking and finance, it won't work. Now, many times, things that look good on paper, when you implement it like communism, it doesn't work. It doesn't mean the ethos, how it is wrong. It just means the implementation cannot be done. So I left, because they actually adopted it in 2017. In 2020, I came back from a massive conference held in Zurich, where the future of Africa, where I was a leader in economy, was debated. And my turning point, clashing directly with the African National Congress leadership, was that no one in that forum, be it third or first world countries, recognized my country of birth. This country, I laid my life down. And it was at that stage that I knew, Howard, if I do not come back and break away like I did before to stand up for justice, we are in deep trouble. So I formed a movement called the United Independent Movement to start to educate the citizens of that country about freedom and what we now at the UIM call, Howard, freeness, not freedom. Because we found that we got freedom in '94, but we didn't get freeness. And then what happened was there was a massive upswell in our country after following the movement we started, and we gained such support that we decided that there was no way but to enter the political sphere. And the United Independent was formed. As everybody now knows, we are the new kid on the block. And we stand for only 5 things. 1, we will vigorously attack and fight crime. There will be 0 tolerance on crime. And coming from where I come, a member that wore a uniform, that fought physically in the struggle, law and order is the basis of a society that wishes to be civilized. Secondly, we will not stop corruption. You know, we've got to stop lying and talking rubbish to people by saying we will stop corruption. We can't stop corruption in the world. But what we can do, Howard, is throttle it and make sure that every system is in place to eradicate the people who are currently participating in corruption. Thirdly, no doubt we need the capital back. Our money is gone. We stole 2 trillion rand, and the budget of this republic is 1.36 trillion a year. So we stole the budget of this country in 2 years. And fourthly, we will defend, protect the constitution of said republic with what we've got. And lastly, I beg that we add a little bit of faith and bring it back to where it belongs. Those are the 5 points of the UIM, and that is why we have grown to where we are, and now have grown to an excess of 1.3 million people supporting us in this republic after only 8 months. That's who we are.
Neil, let's actually ask the question. How many constituencies are you actually, or wards, are you actually fielding candidates around the country? And let's talk specifically about KwaZulu-Natal.
We are fielding 1,200 seats in 35 municipalities, 8 of them metros. At this moment in time, I'm very happy to announce the upsurge in the UIM in KZN, in specifically 3 areas where again next week I will be present, which is Phoenix, Chatsworth, and Pietermaritzburg. Those are the choices of where we got an upsurge of requests. That is where we are participating in KZN at this moment in time. As a new party, as one party called us the other day, insignificant, and a party that has a romance to be in politics. That's what they called us. I find that funny because in 2009, that's what they said about the EFF when they started. So I'm very happy to use the same clause at that moment from the Thule House when they said, Julius is a non-entity and has romance to be president. Well, are we not swallowing those bloody words today? So yes, I am insignificant, Howard, and a non-entity.
So Neil, tell me, what does success look like for you in these elections? Let's speak about eThekwini specifically. What will you be happy with? What percentage of votes?
I think there's in my life of 53 years, there's a dream. And then there's this thing called reality. And sometimes we want the reality to come up to the dream. It's not going to happen. So I'm taking the dream back to reality. I am 25 days out from battle. And success to us in eThekwini is roughly on the wards that we are participating there, 15 to 20% uptake.
So realistically, you're not going to win the municipality. Who
No.
are you willing to go into a coalition with? Would you be happy to go into a coalition with the EFF, with the ANC, with the DA? Who are your natural coalition partners?
Anybody that doesn't lie, anybody that stands for justice, and anybody for a change that speaks the truth. Anybody that is a destructor and not a disruptor, we don't want to speak to them. So it is very clear that the coalition debate at this current moment on record is that we will wait for our seats to settle. We will find coalition partners, obviously, that agree, and those that do not, we will face them as the opposition outright.
So Neil, you're a military man, and I want to talk about the violence and looting that took place in KwaZulu-Natal a few months back. If you were mayor of eThekwini, what would you have done differently?
Well, firstly, I would not be on my seat sitting on my ass. I would actually be in the township, in the informal settlements, and talking to the poor. Because what happens is the people that get appointed, they actually think they Howard anointed. You see, when you are appointed, you are not anointed. You are there to serve. Service, I would have firstly found out the tension that was brewing on the ground. I will make an example. There is an informal settlement called Bombay, which is right across the street from Phoenix. The spillage over that night from Bombay into Phoenix for those people was an unbelievable nightmare of a clash. Certainly people needed to know this was going to happen. And Howard, it's not a debate currently about insurrection. It is, a debate about have-nots and have. And that is something as the mayor that you cannot currently deny, that you are so divorced from understanding the underground swelling. So I think intelligence, and I'm not talking about IQ, I'm talking about information, was one of the critical lapses that we had on all levels of government. There was no intelligence that was coming. And that there was, Howard, was blatantly ignored. So I think, firstly, as a local government leader, I would have been more in touch. Secondly, reaction time was nil. There was not enough reaction time. And can I end up by saying I would have immediately deployed the Department of Social Development and Welfare. Because until today, no matter which side the death or the trauma was, no one has come to the residents and spoken to them to actually say to them, we will take care of you. We will get through this together. So intelligence failure, which I would not have had. Number two, the understanding of that groundswell. And three, absolute care for the people. And that is not a politician's role to be paid to care, Howard. You are a politician because you are here to serve. And that is what I find lacking. And I can talk of experience. I've been there twice now after that period.
So, Neil, how do you rate the capabilities of our military and our police? Because they certainly were absent for the first few days of the looting. People were sent out to go care for themselves. There were residents standing there with baseball bats and hockey sticks looking after themselves because the state, whose principal object is to protect its own citizens, was nowhere to be seen. So
the police were there. No, the police were there. What was not there was police management. There's a very big difference. When you send out a police van, a Isuzu Bakkie, with a sergeant and a constable to go and apprehend people that are currently looting, the only thing that those people, Howard, had was a 9mm pistol. They did not have a shotgun. They did not have tear gas. They had no non-lethal variant of equipment in that police station. So when they arrived on a scene, all they could do was make a choice, Howard. Scream at the guy and tell him to stop or shoot the man with a bottle of tomato sauce. No, sorry, that is a fact. Now, if you are going to pull out a 9mm live round and shoot a person carrying a bag of meal, this is not right. I spoke to the police. They said, General, what were we supposed to do? Fire on them with live rounds? So it is definitely not a problem of the police on the ground. I met them. It's the total failure of SAP's management. And sorry, they never took the blame. Not even in the atrocity that's an assumption, or the fact of the battle of court today, which will have an outcome. But it must be recognized, Howard, that if we did not have leadership in uniform, how will the people on the ground react? So I rate them as the police officers. I will give them an 80% of at least going out there, but I will give SAP's management a -50.
So, Neil, we've got about 5 minutes before we have to wrap up our questioning. And I want to remind everyone watching that you can get a question through to Neil as well. Just post it into the chat or the Q&A section, and let's actually ask Neil some of these important, really important questions. But Neil, while we do, how deep is the leadership in your party? People know you, you've become a social media figure, your videos have gone viral. How deep is the leadership within your own party?
Oh, it is as deep as the Atlantic when you crisscross and go fetch yourself a pearl. It is very, very well constructed. Because, Howard, I am not running a political party. I'm running a strategy. Now, you know, when I sat down, and it's good to see Dr. Kosa here. It's always a privilege to see her. and we need a rose amongst the thorns. You know, I sat with him in Mashaba. I know him for 32 years now. And what we say to each other every day is that I must tell you, Howard, I am heartful of these bloody elections. Let me tell you, I can't wait for 2 November when there's something new on television, because I have not seen a lot of bullshit on polls and on people's mouths like this in my life. Nee, dit is 'n klomp kak. Let me quickly tell you, I entered politics, but I am willfully surprised. This is not Chisenyama. This is utter rubbish. This city works for you. Gemorsman. So I'm sorry, I'm a straight guy. So plain and simply from me, I am telling you right now, my deputy and vice president is a stunning woman. Fatima Abdul. She is a lady of faith. Yeah, she comes from the ACDP, but she was a brilliant stalwart, and she's my vice president. We currently have a working council with Sam Kennedy now that have entered from KZN, and we have approximately 9 members of the now National Management Council. We have covered, by the grace of God, we have covered 7 provincial committees now and executives, and we have currently now got our branches. We are currently on branch number 136, launched in 6 months. So the character Neil de Beer, ex-MK commander, ex-struggle veteran, today is the day. So I am just the face. I'm just the guy that can say, Molweni, by freedom. And that is exactly who I am. Our structure is ready. We are already finished with the elections. We are just waiting to put up the last posters, and then I'm going to govern. Now, I am already looking at how we will govern, because talking is cheap, doing is powerful. And we have rolled out today our 3-point strategy. Mamela Makaba. We have rolled our strategy out. Accountability, implementation, and review. And if the UIM is the one councillor, only if I'm just one councillor sitting in the corner, I will make them pay. I will keep them accountable. I will make them implement, and I will give them a review every 3 weeks. So what are we, Howard? In conclusion, I'm landing my plane, which is a big Boeing, started as a little Cessna. I am telling you, the UIM will be the voice of conscience. It will be the conscious voice. And then in 2024, inshallah, if we are given grace through God, we will come rumble. We have 2 years to prepare. Then we'll see.
So Neil, in the last minute that we have together, and we know you have to go address a group of farmers who get their hands dirty, not like the rest of us who sit behind computer screens. But before you go speak to the real people, just give us a minute on your vision for South Africa.
My vision is the day that I joined Umkhonto we Sizwe on the 4th of July, 1988, when I saw Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. My vision is based on Madiba, a vision of a country that forgot race, a vision of a country that could unite, a vision of a country where our kids could play together and harbor the past to remember, but not live it in the future. The Rainbow Nation was an ideology. Today, that Rainbow Nation has gone from color to black and white again. My dream of a South Africa is a country where we close the gap between the have and the have not. A country that will stop importing rubbish and will start inner trade and proudly do South Africa first. A country that knows where it is going, because there are 2 countries at this moment, one for the rich and one for the poor. And when we sit down in 2024, all of us, every one of us here, are going to have a responsibility to build this country back again. And I want to be part of that country that started so many years ago. The UIM is not the solution. The UIM is part of the solution. And what we want is that day, Howard, that day when we look up and we say, halala, halala, Mzansi, halala. And not one of us that look left or right will see color. Now that is a dream. I am willing to die for that dream. And we will reach it, Howard, because we South Africans are great, great people, no matter what.
Neil, may you have much reason to live to achieve that dream rather than to die for it. Thank you for joining us this evening. We know you have to run. If you've got time, please stay on. If you do need to run, we absolutely certainly understand. But it's been such a privilege and an honor to listen to your vision for South Africa and these inspiring stories. I think everyone watching today has been completely blown away by your honesty, by your integrity, and by this painting of a future South Africa, this vision that you've created for all of us. Neil de Beer, thank you so much.
Thank you, Howard. I'm going to speak to the people that actually make EBC milk, and it's not Woolworths, it's the farmer. To my two colleagues, go for it.
Dr. Makosi Khoza, welcome. You were a little technically challenged in joining us, but I'm so happy that you've managed to join us this evening. A huge welcome to you. Of course, you have a very famous name in South Africa. You are one of the true champions of the fight against corruption in South Africa. Tell us a little about yourself, and then we'll get on to all of the issues about ActionSA.
Well, Makosi Khoza is a woman that comes from very humble beginnings, brought up by a geometric artist mother who has never been to school, but nonetheless was a geometric beadwork artist, and a father who was a worker, a factory worker. And I started off as an entrepreneur. Many people don't know that. Selling fish at the age of 7, supporting my family when my father was retrenched. And I then subsequently financed my entire education myself, right up to PhD level. And I've had a beauty of growing up I've had a number of people that played a part in bringing me up. And some of those people, or the most important ones, Anne MacDonald and Erin Maisel. Erin Maisel is Jewish, and Anne is English, a daughter of a farmer from Zimbabwe. They took me when I became an internal displacee when I was 13 years old, and they taught me how to use a sewing machine and gave me the first asset that I ever owned was a sewing machine. And at the university, I was selling pens and bags and duvet covers, you name it. So that's the side that many people don't know. Really, they taught me how to fish. And that way I was able to finance my own education. Thank you.
So, Makosi, that's amazing. You were part of the ANC. You had a falling out with the ANC. Tell us that story very briefly.
Well, my falling off with the ANC started off, it was a process, it wasn't an event. It started off when I was the chair of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts in the KZN legislature. And I was challenging the corruption of some of our leaders. And one of the contracts that I had a problem with was the Treason Towers contract. And again, at the time when I was the chair of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, the provincial government had overspent over 5 billion. And I had to get them to cut on all the non-essentials, including advertising. And that made me extremely unpopular because at the time, and in fact, even now, they still care more about their faces displayed all over the show than the people who are dehumanized as we speak because they don't have sanitation and they don't have proper housing. So, and I'm glad that even though I was able to get back on the black, but I made a lot of enemies during the process. And subsequently, I was demoted upward as the chief whip of the provincial legislature, a position that I really hated because I thoroughly enjoyed my position as the chairperson of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. And therefore, because I went to school, so I left them and I became the group CEO of Akan Retirement Fund Administrators in Johannesburg. So that was the time when it started. But then what actually happened whilst I was working there, people voted for me, the ANC branches. They liked what I was doing in the provincial legislature. They voted for me in absentia and they wanted me to go back to parliament, to go to national parliament. And they put me as number 7 in the list and I wasn't even at the list conference. So I actually went to parliament because there was confidence of the ANC branches then to say, go there because you will act without fear, favor, or prejudice. And I went to parliament and things kind of spiraled down there, especially during the vote of no confidence on the then President Zuma. Because my view was that South Africans had spoken. It was no longer a party political matter when all South Africans all over South Africa march to parliament and march to different centers around the country, demanding that President Zuma step down. And at that time, I could no longer defend the ANC. I then said, this time I'm going to defy you. And not because I was ill-disciplined, but there comes a time when we have to choose between the people and an individual. And in that case, I decided that I had to choose the people because to me, I think they represented our collective conscience as a nation. And at the same time, they also define our own moral authority. To me, it was more about challenging us to say, you are members of parliament, you seem to have gone astray. Why are you not acting in accordance with our will as the people, consistent with the Constitution of the Republic? And that's then when I went out and I said, I'm not gonna vote for an amoral and immoral president. And then I was persecuted. And I eventually, when they went for my children, obviously, I was forced to leave the ANC.
You've now landed up at ActionSA. I think many of us from Johannesburg know Herman Mashaba. He was obviously mayor of Johannesburg. But tell us about ActionSA as a party. What do you believe in?
One of the things that I like about ActionSA is that they've come up with a model that we have not seen in South Africa since 1994. First of all, when Herman Mashaba left the DA, and I must tell you that he consulted with me whilst I was still a member of parliament in Cape Town. And he did indicate to me that he was considering leaving the DA because it had become right-wing. And that's not what he signed up for. So, but he said he was not going to start a political party unless he gets a buy-in from at least 500,000 South Africans. And Herman Mashaba then decided to ask his family to finance a process called the People's Dialogue, where he consulted every South African who wanted to contribute and, you know, share their fears and their own vision about South Africa. And in that way, I think, and these people, I think we received over 2.4 million submissions. And many people were saying, please establish a new political party. However, we don't want you to be a typical political party. We want you to focus on action. And that is how we became ActionSA. So, and the people were saying, they outlined the 7 core values, and the first one being non-racialism, the second one being the rule of law, the third one being ethical leadership, fourth one was quality education, and the fifth one being economic prosperity. The reason why they linked economic prosperity with quality education is because we prior to that consultation, many people did not realize that a lot of South Africans are actually concerned about the quality of education in South Africa, which is not producing the desired outcomes despite the increase in access, because access is one thing, but what you produce as an outcome is something else. And the other one was social security, because it became very clear to South Africans that we can no longer pretend as if we can't see that these very inequalities that we have in South Africa and this kind of poverty, high poverty levels, and hopelessness of the majority of South Africans, we can't turn our blind eye to that, because as you saw, it's very easy. A hungry and angry person, it is very easy to be triggered by anything. They have nothing to live for. So unlike rich people, they have something to live for. A poor person has nothing to lose except to try and live, even if it means they lose their lives. So, so that is why we have social security, social justice as one of our core values. And finally, ethical leadership is one of those. And finally, the electoral reforms, because we feel that the current electoral system, especially at national and provincial level, is undermining democracy, because we never know who is going to be our president. We never know who is going to be our ministers. We just vote for a political party and they decide who they're gonna make as the president. In other words, it allows for 4,000 delegates of the ANC to decide on who becomes the president of the republic. Whereas we feel that as the head of state entrusted with the responsibility of firing and hiring ministers, you've got to be accountable first and foremost to South Africans, because you are the head of state. And we feel that that is very important for South Africans to elect the president directly. Hence, we are calling for electoral reforms. Basically, in a nutshell, that's what ActionSA, that's how ActionSA came about.
So Makosi, I want to talk about the violence and looting we saw in KwaZulu-Natal in a second. But just before we do, there's a court case happening at the moment between ActionSA and the Independent Electoral Commission over how the party is displayed on the ballots. Just explain to us, when we get into a polling station, when we go to cast our ballot, how will we know what do we look for in order to cast a vote for ActionSA?
A very quick one. I have to tell you that one of the frightening things in South Africa is how the IEC is becoming extremely political, and it is acting as the proxy of the ANC. And that worries us, because right from the beginning, when we were established, I think the ANC was very much threatened by the fact that we got a mandate from over 2.4 million South Africans who said we must establish ActionSA. And again, with over 200,000 volunteers throughout South Africa, we think that the ANC was very much threatened, and we think that it is using the IEC to fight its own battle, to stop ActionSA from getting the support that it deserves from the citizens. And I am saying that because you will recall that, number one, we had a problem with the name, action, the use of the word action. And yet, I mean, you have the economic freedom fighters, they have freedom there. You have the National Freedom Party. They also, you have the word freedom there. And you have the Inkatha Freedom Party. They also have the word freedom there. So really, a word in a phrase, you can't contest that. But when we tried to address it, then they went for the for the logo. They then told us that we're using the South African flag. And I don't understand why it is a crime for us to embrace who we are as a nation, our national identity. We then had to change that. But that was not all. In fact, a week ago, I will tell you something that the IEC did. Despite the fact that we know, all of us, that ActionSA is only contesting 6 municipalities. The IEC only registered eThekwini and KwaDukuza. They didn't register they didn't register the entire of Gauteng, Ekurhuleni, Tshwane, and Johannesburg. And when we challenged them for that, they said it was a clerical error, and they then said they will correct that. So when we finished fighting that, when we went to the ballot paper, we discovered that we don't have a name, we only have a logo. Now the problem is that the IEC somehow thinks that if you don't have an acronym, like for example, the Electoral Act says you've got to have an acronym that is not more than 8 characters. ActionSA is exactly 8 characters. And we don't have a long name. We don't have different names. It's one word, ActionSA. And we said, no, we use ActionSA as our acronym and our full name. And we don't understand why is that a problem. Then they said, if we can't abbreviate that and abbreviate that or make that into an acronym, then they are not going to have us in the ballot paper. And to our surprise, we saw that thing. We are not there. Our name is not there. So, and what is interesting is that it is the first time that many polls, especially in the city of Johannesburg, are showing ActionSA as ahead of the ANC. It's unprecedented in South Africa. And we think this is deliberate. So I'm saying we have that, we are fighting. It might be going to court. We are waiting. It could be going to court on Monday, on Friday or Monday.
So Makosi, let's talk about KwaZulu-Natal and the violence and the looting that we saw over the last few months. If you were in charge, how would that have been different? Okay,
first of all, let us first accept that the levels of poverty and inequalities in South Africa had reached a point where anything could happen at any moment. We have never really addressed this genuinely. The ANC sought to, in its head, thinking that it's addressing it when it actually disempowers people by making sure that it expands the social security net without really addressing the fundamentals. You must remember, in this country, we had Bantu education of 1953, and that Bantu education has never been addressed. So what you have opened the schools, the former Model C schools, but you have not fundamentally changed that inferior education designed to stand Black Africans, called Bantu education. And Black Africans make the majority of South Africa. If you do not address that, obviously you are guilty of perpetuating inequalities. So that has never happened. So you had that climate. But secondly, you must remember that we had, apart from that, you also have the ANC government that has compromised the sovereign state. Remember, chapter 1 of the South African Constitution establishes South Africa as a sovereign, democratic state founded on human dignity. Now, if you are going to open the borders, you allow corruption to a point where anybody and everybody can come in as they wish into South Africa, and you allow corrupt neighboring states, to outsource their economic problems to South Africa when we have not addressed our own problems. Obviously, you are heading for a disaster because the citizens will feel that they are being neglected. Right now, if you look at the majority of people who work at restaurants, it's primarily Zimbabweans. And the reason why they work there, it's because Zimbabweans, they receive Cambridge education, and most of them, they can converse fluently in English, and they've been given the tools of trade. I'm not saying that is a skilled job, but I am saying to South Africa, you are creating conditions where you are now creating a fight between South Africans and people who are coming from other countries by doing that, because they are not going to channel their anger to the state that is creating that problem in the first place, but they are going to be focusing on the foreigners. And then you have what is called xenophobic eruption or whatever. So I am saying what actually happened at that time is a combination of factors. You already had the conditions that were going to anything could have ignited that, whether it is President Jacob Zuma's incarceration, whether it's a match ball team that goes bad, anything could have triggered what happened at that time. We have a state that is incompetent. The social security class are in its entirety, whether it's the defense force, it's the South African police, and the South African police and the state security were never prepared, and clearly they never really thought, I don't think they do a threat assessment on the country. And the president, of course, you saw the president was saying it was an insurrection. So I am saying to you, these were a combination of factors. In other words, the ANC incompetent, which is as a result of corruption, created those conditions. And we must remember, there would not have been shooting if there was a proper plan by the security agencies to deal with situations like that. Because there was nobody to take care of the looting, and my friend Neil was saying, the police were overwhelmed. They didn't even have tear gas. There was unpreparedness, and obviously when people's properties are threatened, then people stood up and started taking up guns. And obviously there were racist elements as well that were using that platform to start attacking people on the basis of race and not understanding that poverty in South Africa is racialized. So the thing is, we had all these factors.
I want to interject there for a second, because it wasn't just about poverty. We saw on television lines 10 kilometers long of cars, luxury cars, semi-luxury cars, all waiting in line to go loot the macro distribution center. It wasn't just about poverty. It's very convenient for us to put it into a box and say it was poverty, or for a president to put it into a box to say there was a dirty dozen of people who did it. But we saw with our own eyes that ordinary people, not poor people, people who owned motor vehicles, went to go loot. Why?
Let us agree on this. The moral fiber of this society is gone. We have no moral fiber. And when that opportunity happened, there was that looting. There is another subtext to that as well. You are absolutely right. There are criminal elements. And again, I will tell you that in South Africa, we have made looting a culture. We've made looting a culture because the state itself, the members of parliament, the ministers, the mayors, the councillors are looting. So you've created that culture of looting. So it's not necessarily saying apportioning the blame to the poor, but we are saying for you to be able to get something like that, you need the masses of the people that are going to be used as an scapegoat. But in the actual fact, you have the collapse of systems in their entirety in the country. So I am saying to you, that happened because the security forces were not prepared. They were incompetent. They were never ready for this. But apart from that, this was also the precedent. And I am saying, in my years in politics, I've been in politics for 35 years. I got involved when I was 12. Even under apartheid, I have never seen that kind of systematic touching of businesses, main roads, national roads, and so forth. And the president said, this was an attempted insurrection, but you can't have an attempted insurrection without the insurrectionists. So where are those people? It can't be that joke, that comedian Ngizwe, this comedian, SABC, former SABC or Ukhozi FM comedian that was arrested. Where are the real culprits? So I am saying to you, there is a lot, this matter is actually needs to be investigated very thoroughly, because you might actually find that some of the sitting ministers were actually part of what we saw during that time, because it has never happened even under apartheid that we saw that kind of widespread looting and touching of businesses at that scale.
Makosi, we've got about 5 minutes left, and there are two things I want to remind people of. The first thing I want to remind them of is that tomorrow night, when we have the rest of our politicians on, you can use the same link that you've used tonight for tomorrow as well, once again starting at 6 p.m. tomorrow. That's the first thing I want to remind you of. The second thing I want to remind you of is you can ask Makosi any question that you want. Either use the Q&A function or the chat function. She's here, she's going to be able to answer any of your questions. Makosi, one of the questions that comes in from Brett says, did ActionSA register an abbreviation for the party? Because the IEC is claiming that in the part that you fill in for an abbreviation, ActionSA never wrote anything in. It didn't write in its 8 letters as ActionSA as an abbreviation. Is that correct?
That is a lie. What was written was that it is the same as ActionSA. It's written in a sentence. It's not saying ActionSA. You know, we didn't write ActionSA, but if my memory serves me correct, we wrote it's the same as the name, as the actual name. That's our abbreviation, basically covering both abbreviation and the actual name. And I mean, you can't have a technicality like an abbreviation as a measure of an organization. Nobody votes for a logo. The IEC has a responsibility as a Chapter 9 institution of promoting democracy. If they picked that up, they ought to have formed ActionSA and say ActionSA and confirm with ActionSA. Is ActionSA your abbreviation? Should we be putting that in? Even if that was the case, the IEC, it's in the constitution. Their role is to deepen democracy. And there is no way you can promote democracy by exploiting a technicality like that.
I think I may have actually written that clause of the Constitution, if I remember correctly. Makosi, I want to ask you a question before we come on to ask you to paint a vision of what South Africa would look like under ActionSA leadership. But before I do that, the Jewish community, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, has had many, many projects. There's the Shiva project, which they're involved in getting doctors and healthcare workers to be able to treat pediatric HIV in KwaZulu-Natal. There's the project to put a computer into every school in KwaZulu-Natal. There's Wheelchairs for Hope. There's the Michelle Scholarship Foundation. That's getting people from Israel to come and work in rural areas in KwaZulu-Natal and do, for example, water pumps and bring out water to communities who've got no access to water. Our community is very, very active on the ground in KwaZulu-Natal in promoting all of these things right across the province. How do you believe that they can work better together with local government and provincial government in order to create greater success and greater impact on the ground in the sort of things that they already do?
Well, I'm going to come from a non-ideological perspective to a very pragmatic perspective. The truth is, the Jews may have suffered physical defeat, but it was never psychological defeat. And I'm saying that because I do believe that with those kinds of programs and initiatives, it also has to do with starting to understand the models that they have used to be successful amidst having gone through that kind of suffering. In South Africa, we have not really started the healing process of the majority of South Africans. That's the starting point. But secondly, those programs that you have, and I'm saying to you, I'm purely addressing this from a purely pragmatic standpoint, not ideological standpoint, is that obviously any help that is going to assist this government to fast track delivering basic services to communities and empowering communities, it will go a long way in actually restoring human dignity that we were founded on. So I am saying to you, it will be for any logical, especially at local government level, where you are not dealing with ideology, you are dealing with service delivery issues. To me, I would say any logical government will work with the Jewish community and ensure that they support whatever initiatives that they do, and they create the conducive environment for them to ensure that whatever implementation of programs they do are documented properly so that they can be replicated and copied by other communities as well. So that it's not just about just giving the computer, but also understanding that a computer is an asset and you've got to look after it with your life because it's giving you the knowledge and the skills and the access to a variety of information that you require in order to empower yourself. So I would say any government, and if I was a mayor, unapologetically, I will definitely work with such communities like the Jewish community and embrace them because the resources that we have are not enough to cover the backlog that we have.
Makosi, in the last few minutes that we have together, paint us a vision of what South Africa looks like under ActionSA leadership.
Well, South Africa under ActionSA is going to be driven by quality culture. As ActionSA, we believe that quality is something that everybody, it doesn't have, it transcends color, it transcends gender, it transcends class, it transcends everything. Everybody loves quality. And if we are going to focus on building a quality culture, we can be like a Singapore, a South Africa. And secondly, we wanted to defend our sovereignty as a country, because you can't be a country that is battling with scarce resources and you have open borders. Yes, you welcome people from everywhere in the world, but you've got to be accountable to your local citizens first and benefit your local citizens first before you can actually give other people an opportunity. So ActionSA, you are going to make sure that we restore the dignity of people, because we are not going to outsource everyday basic services such as waste removal. There is no reason why you should be going out for tender for waste removal, fixing of potholes, and the fixing of burst pipes and so forth. You need to have the plumbers, you need to have the people that are going to be there immediately when a system is reporting that there is a burst pipe there, then the team is dispatched immediately and that is fixed. That way, we are not going to waste this scarce resource under ActionSA. And we wanted to make sure that every citizen is very happy to be South African. We want to build social cohesion because we are better together and united as a country.
Makosi Khoza, whether people vote for ActionSA or not, your name, Makosi Khoza, is going to go down in the history of South Africa as one of the great heroes of the fighters against corruption in this country. And for that, I thank you, and I thank you on behalf of our community. I think you've represented your party beautifully. If you're able to stay on with us to the end, we'd love you to be able to comment about some of the other things that you're going to be hearing this evening. But it's just been such a privilege and an honor to have you both on personally and your party on personally. I know Herman very well. He's come on for a number of webinars with me. He still owes me a visit to Kliptown, which he has promised if he becomes mayor of Johannesburg again, he's coming back with me to Kliptown, because that's a community I'm very close to and that we have to resolve and sort out. And Makosi Khoza, thank you so much. Really a great privilege.
Thank you.
Vusi, I feel bad. You know, it's not easy to, or not fair to make you listen to two other politicians for an hour, but you get the benefit of, you've heard what they said, you've seen what has resonated. And when it comes to talk about the EFF, I'm sure you have some interesting comments to make. But I have a question, first of all, that comes out of some of the comments from your party leadership this week. Is there any role for a white man left in South Africa?
Yes, there is a role. The preamble to our constitution is very simple. South Africa belongs to all who live in it. And we extracted that directly from the Freedom Charter. And it is, but we are not going to force people to want to, we are not going to beg people to be part of South Africa. Everyone has got a role to play. There's only one thing that EFF is asking: equality and justice. That is all. And everyone is welcome, as long as we observe those two. If you are committed to equality of all races and you are committed to justice, and you are welcome.
So let's talk about, how do we achieve both equality and justice? I think it's very hard for anyone watching us tonight to not buy into that vision of equality of justice. The question is, how do we practically achieve that?
It's very simple. We are where we are today. Firstly, let's start with the history of colonialism. Fast forward to apartheid, and up to now, the indigenous African people have always been on the receiving end of all the wrongs that have been perpetuated. When colonizers came to settle here, they dispossessed people of their land, they dispossessed people of their livestock, they moved people to a land that you cannot work, and unproductive land. Apartheid legislated this dispossession, and the African people were forced to live as paupers in their own motherland. So if you talk about equality, apartheid has entrenched a system where Black people were not even a second class or third class or whatever, were taken like people with no rights, no dignity, no life. If you look at South Africa today, 27 years under ANC government, what do you see? You have Nyanga, Langa, Bambai in eThekwini, Bastards, you have Deep Slot. The life for a Black African person has not changed from colonialism through to apartheid up to the democracy. So what EFF is saying, we need to do certain things that will ensure that we create equality. And how do you create equality? Not through some flimsy reconciliation, as other people would want to tell us. People want us to believe that 27 April 1994, boom, we were all equal. Boom, we've achieved freedom, etc. No, justice is when there's a condition that has been created of equality. That's what EFF is striving for. Then it takes us to why was the EFF born? Most of us were booted out of the ANC, just like Makosi Khoza, greetings to her and the other panelists and the host. Were booted out because we stood for what the ANC originally stood for. But when the ANC started deviating and choosing some and gone rogue, because let's agree, ANC has left its path, it has gone rogue. When most of the leaders in the ANC started deviating from the mandate, some of us stood up and said, but it can't be, because you are no longer what we stood for. We were putted out. Okay, we were putted out, we found ourselves a home. EFF was born. And EFF is pillared on 7 cardinal pillars, non-negotiable. The first pillar, the 7 pillars is what is going to bring us equality and justice in South Africa. The first pillar is that all South African land must be expropriated without compensation. Why? So that it can be equally distributed amongst all people for equitable use. The second pillar is that we need to nationalize the mines, banks, and other strategic sectors of the economy. Why do we say mines must be nationalized? You can't have a situation where, apartheid and colonialism created an impression where foreigners, outsiders, would come here, set up companies, extract our mineral resources, and expatriate the profit. And what do Black people benefit out of that? Menial jobs and underpaid and diseases that they get from the mining sector. We need to nationalize those mines and make sure that the state uses all that money, all that profit in order to better the lives of our people. The banks is organized crime. Banks, they do as they wish. As much as people would say banks are regulated and all that, they are not. As we speak now, there's evidence that banks are perpetrators of discrimination. If you are a white person, they would give you prime -2 +2. If you are a white person, if you are a Black person, they'll give you prime +10. It's there. There's evidence out there. It's a perpetuation of inequality, and they do as they wish. They interfere with the economy, devalue the rand, etc. Number 3, we need to build state capacity from municipal level to provincial level to national level, so that we do away with tenders. Once you do away with tenders, 1, you will create better jobs, people will be paid better, but you will cut this conduit of corruption. Tenders are the facilitators of corruption. And once you do away with tenders, because people create these ridiculous tenders, issue out these tenders, give it to their friends and relatives and spouses and girlfriends and boyfriends, and get kickbacks from those tenders, even if they give it to business people. But we know that they get it back by form of a kickback. That's an enabler for corruption. Tenders, we do away with tenders and we insource workers. The fourth pillar, we are calling for free quality education, free healthcare, and free housing and sanitation. And I know some people would say, where is the money going to come from? There's the money from the mines that will be nationalized. That's where the money will come from. I remember there was a strike from the loanmen strike. The mines were saying they are losing billions a day, but they couldn't give workers 12,500 rand, to a point where workers were mowed down and murdered. When they tell you that because of this strike, we are losing 2 billion a day, you wonder why is it so difficult to pay the workers 12,500 rand per month if you lose so much of money. Pillar number 5, we believe that without massive industrialization, we won't be able to end poverty. You know, South Africa it's very funny. Most of the food we eat is imported. The things that we use in the house, including your spoon and your plate, and even the toilet paper from that matter, made in China. So we're importing. We are consumers. We are not producing. We are not creating jobs here. We are creating jobs elsewhere, even the automotive industry for that matter. We might be assembling here because they are assembling plants, but where do the parts come from? They're not made here. They are imported. When in other economies, they will charge you less tax if you import raw material, but they will charge you higher tax if you import finished products. South Africa is the opposite, and it's the tax regime is a mess. Pillar number 6, massive development of the African economy. We believe, just like in the Jewish community, followed by the Muslim Islam community, they've been able to focus on developing their own economies. The economy of the Jewish people of the Jewish faith is developed. They are able to trade amongst themselves, and their money circulates among themselves before it even goes out. Same with the Muslim communities. But look at what is happening in the Black community. And not because Africans cannot think. It is because the system was designed in that way, that whatever little that you are going to earn from your job, you must use that to travel a long distance to the village where you are staying, so that you will have no money. You wake up very early in the morning, get onto the transport, spend all that money, come back in the evening, you are tired, you go to sleep. At the end of the month, you have no money because you spent all your money on transport. It was a systematic, it was engineered to render African people perpetual slaves. So we need to develop the African economy and focus on ensuring that the African economy is self-sustainable, not this thing of bringing malls into the village and into the township. And you go to that mall, and that mall is not brought for the benefit of the African people in that village. It is bought for the benefit of the big chain supermarkets and retail stores, because a poor guy like myself, a villager, cannot own a shop in that mall. So the malls are actually not building the African economy. They're just there for themselves for profit and create menial jobs, cheap jobs. So instead of industries and factories, they are building malls which are draining the African economy, not plowing anything back. The last one, we are calling for, or under EFF government, we will create an open, accountable, and corruption-free government and society without the fear of victimization of state agents. Today, a person goes on a cell phone and say, "I call." Then they say, "Yeah, you are instigating violence. you get arrested. And what does ICAL mean? It means nothing, but you get people like the DA who go to Phoenix, where African people were massacred. And people say, no, it was not a massacre. But a dictionary explanation of the massacre is a random matter of people. Black people were randomly murdered in Phoenix. And guess what happened? Ramaphosa, the president, goes there and he hails them as heroes. Thank you for protecting your communities. The DA, now, no sensitivity, no feeling, no respect for the families of the deceased, goes up, puts up posters that says the ANC called you racist, we are calling you our heroes. The level of arrogance and insensitivity, we are saying we need to create a society that will be mindful and be sensitive of all these things. But you are not going to create that society if we are not integrated as a nation. This thing of separate developments, the rich must move to Palito and La Lucia, and then they must put up boom gates so that if you look shabby like myself, you are not welcome here. What do you want here? And you must go to some informal settlement, or you must go to some RDP house far away from the center. We'll integrate communities, will identify pieces of land as a municipality in places like Umhlanga, La Lucia, Sentin, doesn't matter, and put social housing there, integrate our communities. That is why EFF was established. That's our vision.
So Vusi, are very interesting 7 points. So some of them I think a lot of people will agree with, some will disagree with, but I'm sure you as a party have looked around the world and identified countries which have implemented similar policies, and those act as role models for us. So which of the countries around the world that have followed these sorts of policies does the EFF look up to as success stories?
I know people would have expected me to say Cuba and Venezuela. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to start with China. China has done exactly what we are saying. They are the best economy in the world. No individual owns land in China. No foreigner can go to China and own tracts of land. It doesn't happen. The state owns the land. They are for industrialization, massive industrialization. They import very little and export a lot. So China is one of those shining beacons where socialism is in practice and it is succeeding. Followed by, of course.
Let's actually stop there, because you have in China one of the worst human rights abusive nations in the world. Now, if you're holding out as your shining example from an economic perspective, China has managed to do what it does because it's oppressed its people, it's oppressed democracy, it has persecuted Muslims. It cannot be an example for any South African here to hold out China in the same way that the EFF has gone to Zimbabwe and supported the ruling dictatorship in Zimbabwe. There are legitimate concerns about your party and your party's attitude when it holds out human rights abusers as shining examples. That should be unacceptable to any South African, particularly one who has quoted from our own constitution.
Can I come in and say that it's easy for you to say that about China when here in South Africa, human rights are being abused? Human rights are being abused here. It's not worse in China. You will talk about sweatshops. You'll talk about certain people being targeted. It's happening here in South Africa. It's done by everybody. So it's not different. I was talking from the economic point of view, the successes where we underpin. Human rights is another story. Whether it's human rights violation in Zimbabwe or South Africa or in America for that matter, it's still human rights. It's still evil. I thought we were talking about economics and what we should be looking at as a model or as a basis. Obviously, there'll be rights and wrongs there, just like there's a rot in South Africa. Just like are you going to tell me it's not a human right to subject people to live in that squalor in Diepsloot, in Nyanga and Langa, when people must jump sewer for them to get into the house and get out, where children are drowning in rivers and pit toilets, And people are going to say, no, but South Africa is better than China in terms of human rights record. No, we are here as the EFF and we are saying all these wrongs, whether they are done in China, Africa or South Africa, they are the same. When black little children drown in sewers, in toilets, because the government does not care, can't create flushing toilets for them, that's a violation of human rights. When people go to bed without anything to eat, when people are forced to stay in shacks against their will, that's a gross violation of human rights. And we're not apologetic about that. So it happens everywhere.
No, I think that's a very legitimate answer. I want to talk about the EFF in KwaZulu-Natal and the call to the president to not call out the army after the looting that we saw. Do you think in retrospect that was the right decision?
Yes, it was the right decision. You can't have a government that unleashes an army on its own citizens. Why did we say they must not unleash the army? The army is trained to shoot, to kill. You will find that most of those people that died were shot and killed because the army's job is to defend against an enemy that to defend the state. The state was not under threat here. The state was not under threat. I will elaborate on that point. It was, if you unleash the army on your people, what people needed was leadership, and there was none. There was none. For days on end, you saw the Ramaphosas and the Begiceles on TV. They were not on the ground. Instead of going down there and confront the so-called looters on the act and say, but why are you guys doing this? They never did that. They stayed away. They stayed away. They were nowhere to be seen. What was their response? Unleash the army. Because the police have failed. Where was leadership when they were supposed to be on the ground talking to those people? I'm saying the state was not under threat, so there was no need to unleash the army. Yes, President Ramaphosa says it was an attempted coup or insurrection. Nonsense. It was an uprising of the people. You have unjustifiably locked down the country for years, for almost a year and a half. People have lost jobs. Companies have shut down. People can't eat, can't breathe. You're putting masks on their faces. They literally can't breathe. They are hungry. They can't go to fend for themselves. After that, with your factions within the ANC, you begin to fight. This was a fight of the ANC. All of us as a country, we were caught in this nonsensical infightings of the ANC. Two factions. You've got Ramaphosa's faction says we want to deal with Zuma, we'll send him to jail so that we can flex our muscle. And President Zuma's supporters say, you dare send Zuma to prison, the country will burn. Instead of being prepared, because that's not an idle threat. So Ramaphosa knows his thugs, because all these thugs are from his party. Instead of him saying, hey, there's a threat here, police, intelligence, state security, be prepared. There could be an explosion here. He doesn't, because he thought his own thugs didn't have guards to pull this. He thought they were bluffing. And then the country started burning. He didn't know what to do. This was an ANC thing. All of us were caught in between. Because even if the issue of former President Zuma was the trigger, here's the question. How do you send, what harm can an 80-year-old man do? You send an 80-year-old man to jail without trial and you expect people are going to clap hands and smile. Only the evil ones would do that. And then the country erupted and we ended up here. Unleashing soldiers was never a good idea. It's not a good idea. It should never happen. We've got police. All we need here is leadership, and there was none. They ran because they wanted the soldiers to come and do their dirty job, their cleanup, because they messed up the country. This was the ANC factions fighting, and we were all victims. Two elephants are fighting. We, the people, the grass, ended up suffering.
So, Vusi, where does your party actually stand on Jacob Zuma? Because we've gone from a position whereby your party leader was prepared to die for Jacob Zuma. Then we went to a position where he needed to pay back the money and he was considered the arch criminal and the symbol of corruption. Now we go for Tiet and Kandler. Where exactly does your party stand on justice for the people of South Africa and how Jacob Zuma is involved in that? Should he go to jail?
I'll start by the T in Kandla. The T in Kandla was initiated by the commander-in-chief because we have a leader who is visionary. He can see things before they actually happen. He went to Nkandla to say, old man, cooperate with the commission, go and state your case there. Because if you don't, these people are going to arrest you, throw you in jail, and throw away the key. President Zuma being President Zuma, it defied even that. It's because the commander-in-chief foresaw this thing, just like he always foresee things and speak about things before they happen, and people laugh about it. 6 months later, boom, it happens exactly like that. That's why he went to Nkandla. Let's go back. President Zuma is none of our problem at the moment. At the time when we pressurized him, he was a president of a country and the president of the ANC. He represented a corrupt system. So we had to go for him. He was the face of that corrupt system. So we had to go for him. We had to make him pay back the money that was wrongfully taken from the people of South Africa to sustain his lifestyle. Just like we are on Ramaphosa now. Ramaphosa killed workers in Marikana. He represents a system that killed workers in Marikana. He represents a people that massacred people in Phoenix. We are going for him. But Zuma is a pensioner. He must be allowed to retire peacefully in Nkandla. What are you going to benefit by pursuing an 80-year-old? And we see all these hypocrites. When P.W. Botha, who was supposed to have faced crimes against humanity, refused to appear before the TRC. He was charged, given a fine. One of the things that were said is that the man is just 80 and plus, he can't be incarcerated, he must go. And everybody was cool with that. But wait until it becomes Jacob Zuma. You see, selective morality.
So shouldn't we actually have sent both him and Jacob Zuma to jail? Isn't that the correct answer? Because the moment we allow any of them off the hook, the human rights abusers, the people who steal from you and me, the people who, because let's face it, the money stolen in this country wasn't stolen from the rich. It was stolen from the pensioners who had nothing. It was the houses we didn't build. It was the state pensioners who had all their money taken away. Those were the victims. And if we do not demand justice on behalf of those victims, we are saying to the current president and the next president, you too can escape justice. We have to hold our leaders to account. And by you saying, oh, well, there's precedent before because we had a great human rights abuser who didn't go to jail, takes the very principle for which you think you should stand for.
Let's go back. The human rights abuse started in 1652. You want us to go that far? Let's not start with Zuma. Let's not start with Thabo Mbeki. Let's not start with Malema or anybody else for that matter. 1652, when the land thieves landed here and dispossessed people of their land and dispossessed people of everything. Should we start there? Where do we start? The best time to start is now. But when you start now and you have people who abused human rights who are still alive now, let me make you an example how messed up South African justice is. The TRC may name the people that should have been prosecuted. To date, the NPA has never acted. You are correct in saying if we let these things slide, we are creating a wrong precedent. But why must we start with Zuma when de Klerk is still alive? De Klerk killed people here in Amakuta, yeah, just outside my village here, with the Malans and everybody for no reason. Must we go to Buthelezi and say, Buthelezi, you killed people in Katlehong, your IFP killed people in Katlehong, or must we say, no, let's let that slide, let's move on. The SANDF killed black people in townships, shot them willy-nilly. And we have records of that, piles and piles at the TRC, and people that should have been prosecuted, none have been prosecuted. Others were allowed to die in peace. And then it's selective. You arrest that one, charge that one. What about the rest? That's why I'm saying we need justice. We need equality, not this selective morality that we see happening in South Africa. It's wrong.
So Vusi, let's turn towards the future at the moment. What do you think we should do with the Ngoyama Trust?
I'm glad you raised this issue because a lot of people are confusing issues here. When as the EFF, that's why we had a very good relationship with His Majesty the King, the late, may his soul rest in peace, because he called us and he said, what is this thing that you talk about expropriation of land? You want to take my land? We said, no, and let us explain it. Ngoyama Trust is state land. It's land that was under KwaZulu, the then KwaZulu government. Because of the trade-offs at CODESA, it was agreed that this land must not be put under South Africa directly, but it must still be kept under a trust, and the sole trustee being His Majesty the King, Goodwill Zwelithini at the time, for administration purposes. But ownership of that land still lies with the state. So what do we say as EFF when we say expropriate all land and put it under the custodianship of the state? We are saying take all land and put it under the government. In terms of who administers it, just like in Ngoyama Trust land, that is state land, that's government land, under the trusteeship and administration of the chiefs and the kings, etc., etc. That's an administrative arrangement. As to what should happen, as EFF we are saying, expropriate the rest of the land, the farms, the farmland, the land that are lying far, the land that is owned by a multinational corporation, expropriate that, put it under government, and then come up with an administration. But obviously people will say, but this government is corrupt. There will be corruption. When we say government, we are talking about an anti-corrupt, corruption-free government of the EFF, not this corrupt ANC government, because they'll corrupt the land. So in Ngoyama Trust land is state land under the administration of the chiefs.
So Vusi, we need to bring our discussion to a close. But I want to, number one, remind people that they can still ask you a question. So please put a question either into the Q&A section or alternatively into the chat. We would love to put your comments and your questions to Vusi. But Vusi, while people do that, I want to give you the opportunity as well to paint a vision for us of what would a much better South African look like under the leadership of the EFF.
Howard, South Africa that we envision, it will be a South Africa where everybody has equal access to land, where most of the money that gets to be used is taken from the mines, derived from the mineral wealth. There's enough money there, where everybody, every child has got an equal opportunity in life, beginning from an early childcare development, high school through to tertiary for free. A country where we will have massive industrial development, manufacture our everyday requirements ourselves and export. A country where everybody will be empowered, given access to land for agriculture, for residential purposes, and for industrialization. You can't achieve that when almost 80% of land is in the ownership of less than 5% of the population. That is the kind of South Africa that we envisage. A South Africa where every household will have an income, whether by form of a basic income grant or whether by form of a job in every home or a business in every home, where nobody goes to bed hungry. A country where every citizen has got electricity, running water, and proper sanitation and flushing toilets, not this disgrace and crime against humanity that we experience in South Africa, in municipalities that are run by the DA in Cape Town, or municipalities that are run by the ANC in Nelson, anywhere else, in Joburg, in Johannesburg, and eThekwini, etc., etc. 27 to 30 years into democracy, we still have got pit latrines. For what? When you can go to an informal settlement, dig up huge septic tanks if you don't have money for piping, huge septic tanks, connect the sewer, and have flushing toilets. Why should our children drown in pit latrines when you can go right there, drill a borehole tomorrow, put up a septic tank, and put up flushing toilets for our children like that? You don't need a miracle. That's the kind of South Africa that we envisage, where economically we are prospering, where there is no corruption, where the corrupt are brutally dealt with, where there is no racism but equality, where there's no superiority by other races who think that they are superior from others because of their skin color or the suburbs where they come from or the jobs they do. That's the kind of South Africa we envisage, a home for all.
Vusi, I don't know if you're a betting man or not, but let's put a number on where the EFF hopes to be in KwaZulu-Natal percentage-wise, or in eThekwini percentage-wise after these elections. What would you be happy with as a result?
We will be happy taking eThekwini. That's our first prize. And King Zetwayo, and all these other municipalities. Let me tell you why we can take eThekwini. The internal squabbles within the ANC, you can write a book about them. So the ANC is finished in eThekwini. Number two, given the corruption and the shenanigans that have unfolded, people have said, we've had enough, it's time for change. And lastly, if you look at the growth of EFF, we came into the scene in 2014. In eThekwini, in 2016 local government elections, we've had 8 members. And we grew, if you look at our provincial, if you compare 2019 and 2014, in 2019, we got 2% in eThekwini. In 2014 when we came. But in 2019, we got 10%. So we're able to raise our numbers in KZN province from 2 members of provincial legislature to 8 in 2019. So if we were to quadruple what we've done, because we've demonstrated that from 2014 to 2019, we quadrupled our support. If all we need to do is to do exactly that this time around, and we are a majority party. We've campaigned, we've done our homework. The ANC is going down. The DA has reached a ceiling, and ActionSA will assist us to take votes from the DA and kill them. Our friend from UIM is going to take all the votes from the DA, and EFF is going to cruise nicely into the position of leading eThekwini. We are cruising.
Vusi Khosa, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I think one of the questions that we keep on hearing from people is, I don't know who to vote for, but I think this evening we've had 3 such clear visions, different visions, but 3 unbelievable visions for what a future South Africa could look like, that there certainly is an enormous amount of choice out there. And come November the 1st, I wish you luck. I'm sure you're on the campaign trail. I hope that the EFF posters all over KwaZulu-Natal at the moment, but most importantly is we have to get people to the polls. Our future is not something that we trust in the hands of politicians once every 5 years. It's about being active citizens, it's about participating in politics. It's about going to meet your candidates standing in your ward, about engaging with your political parties like we've done tonight with Vusi and all of the other candidates. We need South Africans to get involved, because only when we take responsibility for our own future, only then will we create a much better South Africa for all of those who live with it. Khaya, over to you.
Thank you, Howard, for artfully facilitating a riveting raw conversation, and to you, Vusi Koza from the EFF, Mr. Neil De Beer from URM, and Dr. Makosi Koza of KZN, for your insights and your honesty and your passion. I'm sure I speak for others too when I say how inspiring and encouraging it is to hear from a cross-section of leadership who are thinking deeply about how to better KwaZulu-Natal and our country. Thank you for taking the time to acknowledge our constituency and for partnering with our leadership in engaging our community and our democracy by better informing our votes. Tomorrow night, we continue the discussion with the DA, the ACDP, and IFP. Join us with the same link, same time, 6 p.m. On behalf of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies KwaZulu-Natal Council, thank you for your participation and your questions. Please vote, and I wish you a very good night.